Happy Sunday, guys. It's Yemi, chat boxing Yemi Babatunde, and here's my guest, the one and only Chris Andrew Boxing. You all good, Chris? How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me on. It's lovely to be able to come on and talk to you. How are you,
Yeah,
Yemi? Everything all right?
I'm good. I'm good. As you know, it's been an eventful week of boxing, and yesterday was definitely a fight to remember. What was your thoughts on the fight, first of all? The Lee Wood and Michael Conlan.
It was a terrific affair. I thought Conlon started very, very well. I thought his tactics were spot on. He was making Wood miss, but then when Wood was coming inside and sort of trying to force the fight, Conlon wasn't overawed, and he was finding a lot of space to the body as well, and it was having a real effect on Wood. He was also using a lot of misdirection, feinting as though he was going to come downstairs and instead going upstairs. And I thought he was boxing brilliantly for the first 5 rounds. After that, Wood started to come into it a lot more, and I thought the mid rounds were competitive. That could have gone either way, sort of swing rounds. And up until round 10, I thought, Wood had round 8 for sure was his. Conlon, I thought, won round 9, getting on the back foot. So up until round 10, I thought, okay, there's been a sweep early for Conlon. He's got them knocked down too. A couple of those middle rounds could have gone either way. Conlon just needs to see this fight out. But he kept wanting to sort of engage and fight. And while I understood it brought him a lot of success in the middle rounds, he was clearly getting tired, and I wanted to see him tie up a lot more, spoil the fight essentially. Whereas instead what was happening is that he got so tired, and yet he was still throwing punches back. And against a puncher, that's what he wants you to do. He wants to exchange with you. And so in the end, I guess it was just Russian roulette, and he got caught. And yeah, that's how I saw it really. How did you envisage it?
I think, definitely. Colin definitely got a great boxing clinic towards Lee Wood. Unfortunately, I think he just went out of steam. I think he got too good away with test up, and just should have just did more sprinting and just kept in with the jab. And because I think he just tried too hard to get into a scrap, and I think he tied a bit as well on the back road. I think when he was on the back road, that's when Lee Wood got his game. He was able to hit him the best when he got him against the ropes. I think Collins just played it smart. He was winning the fight and just kept in the distance and kept him in a jab in the center of the ring.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Chris Lloyd was saying post-fight that everything that Wood was landing, whether it was to the body, to the head, to the shoulders, arms, wherever it was, there were such big thudding shots that they were wearing Conlon down. Do you agree with that? I mean, obviously they were heavy shots, but I still feel that in a way Conlon was willingly going back to the rope. It was like a tactical thing sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
At least that's how I was seeing it. How did you see that personally?
I definitely think it was tactical. With him trying to get into, I think maybe we were trying to catch him, and we were trying to get him with some hooks. I think that because usually, as you know, Con's not a power puncher, but when he got him in early towards the first one, that knockdown, I think that gave him a lot of boost. And felt like he should. I think he got carried away with the power and should have focused more on the boxing.
Oh, interesting. So you feel as though he was going for he thought, right, I can hurt this guy whenever I want. So he started taking risks.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible. Do you think in a rematch, how do you think a rematch would go? Do you think he would approach it more intelligently and win it, or do you think Wood's got his number now?
We have to box him because clearly Wood's got that knockout power. So we definitely have to outbox him in order to win the rematch.
Definitely one I'd want to see.
Definitely. So with regards to well, I'm thankfully, it's good to that. Collins is all good now. I think he did an interview with Boxing Social, asking for the rematch. It was good. It was glad to hear that he's actually, he's back and hopefully he's got his full faculties. Because I was worried out there because that knock at the ring, that was, wow, that was shocking. That was, I'm mindful. Because I heard people say that he had a faint before he got to the rings. Because I heard people saying that he was he had like a blackout. Then he was knocked at the ring. So I wasn't too sure whether they potentially might be bleeding to the brain. That caused him to fall out the ring.
Oh wow, I've not heard that. Yeah, I've not heard that. That's a very worrying development if that's happened. God willing, the guy's all right.
Absolutely, definitely. So definitely fight of the year, and if it was a rematch, then bring it on. If not, do you think going forward, do you reckon Lee Wood is definitely a person who potentially could challenge Leo Santa Cruz and Josh Warrington? Definitely now, legit.
Well. The thing is, he's got he's a big puncher, so he's always going to, and he's got obviously a lot of heart. He's durable. We've seen that now because even when he looked like he was wobbling and gone on his feet. He's stuck in there. You know, he was hanging in there. And when you've got that sort of punch and power and that self-belief, and he's got a great team behind him in Ben Davison and Lee Wiley in terms of analytical, so they'll be able to spot the weaknesses of opponents. And if you're a puncher and you are able to capitalize on a weakness and land, you can change the fight at any given moment. He's not going to be the favorite in a lot of those fights. You know, I think Navarrete's definitely got to stay away from. But again, Josh Warrington, you could see overall, he was winning most of the fight against most of the exchanges against a guy like Lara. But Lara was able to land at moments where it changed the course of the fight.
Yeah.
If Lee Wood can become that style of fighter where he starts to punch with a guy like Warrington, who knows what happens, right? So he's riding on the crest of a wave right now. He's got 2 really good back-to-back wins. And he seems like a nice kid too, a likable kid. Nottingham obviously turned out last night. It was a great atmosphere. And they haven't had a star since Carl Froch really retired. So he's there ready to fill those boots. And it makes for an exciting...
The new show of Nottingham, as I said, the new show of Nottingham, absolutely. So definitely it was an entertaining fight. And did you see, regards to Warrington, would Eddie risk Warrington and fighting Lee Wood?
Lee Wood. Well, I guess because Wood's with DAZN, I don't know.
Warrington is a big tech seller, so if Warren get knocked out by Lee Wood, would that risk, Eddie losing a cash cow?
Potentially, but then does Lee Wood step into that mold? It's a big fight, and if Warrington, look, with all due respect to Lee Wood, I think he's doing terrifically well. Right? Don't get me wrong. As you can see, I'm very praising of what he's done, but Warrington has operated at a high level. So if he is going to get stopped by the likes of Lee Wood, he might look at it, Eddie, and say, well, look, he's at the twilight of his career anyway. So, now we can build up a new star. If you're looking at it from a sort of Machiavellian perspective, that's how you might look at it. But the fact of the matter is, Eddie's never really been afraid to make some big fights, especially within his own stable. He was willing to risk these guys and then help build them afterwards. I mean, you look at some of the fights that have taken place over the years, you can see that. So, yeah, I think he'd be willing to do it if the money's right. You'd have a Leeds versus Nottingham Forest type rivalry as well. So the atmosphere is going to be terrific. And also they had. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, that'd be Leeds versus Nottingham. That'd be event to see. And I think Eddie trying to get him at the City Stadium.
Yeah, see, that would be incredible. And the thing is, as well, you've got the way the fans were set up last night. It was segregated. So you had like football, you had home fans, away fans. They weren't mixed in, and I wasn't sure how that would work out in terms of it's going to be crowd trouble. They're going to be trying to get at each other. Now there was crowd trouble. It might have been a lot worse had they been mixed in. So who knows? Maybe they'll need added security. But in terms of an atmosphere, it made it brilliant. And so you can imagine a Leeds versus Nottingham Forest type thing as well. That's going to boost the atmosphere. It's going to be a great spectacle. So, yeah, I'd be for it. I'd love to see that fight.
Absolutely. In terms of Mick Collin going forward, do you think definitely he can become world champion? Definitely, as long as he get over this trauma of losing to Lee Wood. You definitely, because I definitely
for me,
tonight.
Well, you know what? Actually, you raise an interesting question. I've never thought of that. Up to now, I've been thinking along the lines of, listen, can he overcome this physically? Is there going to be any physical fingerprints of what happened? But you make a good point about this trauma of it. Psychologically, he's a very confident guy. You could see from the way he was walking down to the ring, he had his arms out. He felt like he was there to be crowned last night. Does this take away from that confidence? Because if it does, then he might not be the same fighter anymore. So, yeah, there are some question marks there. You raise a good point there. I think mentally he'd be okay. He's got his brother there with him. He's got a good, a really good pedigree. I think he'd find his feet again. He'd understand. But, yeah, how he recovers mentally in terms of how he recovers physically, that's another question. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's already asked for a rematch, so see how it goes. See if Eddie will weigh up his option. Eddie will see, is there more money in the Wood Collin rematch, or is there more money in Warrington if he beats Martinez? Because I think that's either going to be the case. It's either going to be Leo Santa Cruz, a rematch with Collin, or a fight with Warrington or Martinez winner.
Yeah, I mean, I guess because he's got so many options now, I guess Lee Wood's team's going to have a big part to play in this as well, because, Wood is riding on the crest of a wave right now. And he might be thinking, listen, I want to strike while the iron's hot. So rather than a rematch, I've done this, I've beaten Conlon, I want to try and extend my legacy further. Because let's say he goes on to fight Warrington and he loses. You could then have a Conlon rematch down the road, even without a belt. And because this fight was so good, people would still want to see it. So I can imagine him wanting to go, do you know what I mean, go for a big star name now. I think that will be the way he goes. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
Definitely. Okay, that's our insight into the Leeward McCollum. Back to my interest in this interview. I want to know your background in boxing and what made you start your own YouTube channel, because you're one of the YouTubers that I really respect, Chris. You're very insightful, very analytical, very intelligent. You come from a very analytical standpoint. So I want to know where did your passion in boxing come from? Where's your background? Were you like what made you start your own YouTube channel?
Oh, firstly, thank you. I'm very flattered to hear that, Yemi. Thanks so much. Well, when I was a little kid, I started martial arts. I started karate. That was the first thing I did as a little kid, just to learn self-defense, really. I was really little. It was a bit of exercise. As I got a bit older, I started doing kickboxing, and I did that for a number of years. Okay. And the gym was a mixed kickboxing gym with a boxing gym. And I played football as well. And it was my dream to become a footballer. So I had quite muscular legs and powerful legs. And so kickboxing was better for me than boxing because, yeah, I could punch a little bit too, but my legs were my best weapon, I guess you could say. So I was sort of practicing more kickboxing than boxing. But I was doing a bit of both. My mum, though, would get panic attacks when I would talk to her about potentially competing. She was so afraid. She knew somebody who was a fighter. My dad also had, my dad was a painter and decorator, and he painted the house of Michael Watson. So what they really got on, they were sort of friends, you could say, not they weren't close. My dad's English isn't great at all. So he was never going to become really close with someone because of the language barrier, but they really respected each other. They enjoyed each other's company and that sort of thing. And my dad had a real soft spot for him. Michael Watson used to give him t-shirts and stuff. He used to have these Watson t-shirts. So when what happened to Michael Watson happened to him, it was, I remember my dad was just so down about it. And my mum became petrified of the fact that, I was practicing this sport as well. So I was never going to be allowed, so to speak, as a youngster to pursue it. So in the end, they started pushing me more towards football. And when I was about 16 years old, I had to really decide which of the two am I going to try and sort of do something in. And I ended up going more down the football route. Unfortunately, I didn't make it as a footballer. But that was how I sort of got into kickboxing and boxing and martial arts. And in terms of the analytical side of it, I've just always been a very analytical person. I like to look deeper into things. I don't just want to hear, oh yeah, he should have boxed on the back foot. Okay, well then why didn't he? What happened? What led to him not being able to? Oh, he gets hit with a lot of left hooks. Okay, why does he get hit with a lot of left hooks? I like to sort of break down things and get to the detail of it in all aspects of life, not just boxing. I think, you can't just trust any authority just blindly. You have to be able to, but you shouldn't also form an opinion without really looking at evidence. So you shouldn't distrust for no reason either. And I think I've got that mindset in general in life. So I like to sort of break things down, analyze them, and just apply that sort of mindset to boxing, and that's basically what I do.
Well, when you were younger, what were some of the boxers you looked up to? Was it like we into Tyson, Ali, Lex Lewis, Nas, Eubank? What were some of the boxers that you were a fan of watching when you were growing up?
So I was one of those weird people, right, that liked both Eubank and Ben. I liked them both. I know they hated each other, but I liked them both. I think as a kid as well, Mike Tyson had this aura about him. My dad loved Mike Tyson as a fighter. I can't really say that I had sort of idols when I was a really little kid. Boxing back then was on Sky. We weren't exactly well off, and we lived in a council flat too, and you weren't allowed to have a dish up, so it was too high up, so it was dangerous. So we couldn't have Sky, so I couldn't really watch as much boxing. But my grandfather owned a social club, and he would take me sometimes when I'd go and stay around. He'd wake me up at 4 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever it was, and we'd drive down to the social club. And then I'd be allowed on special occasions to stay up and watch fights, Tyson Holyfield and stuff like that. I think when I really first got into boxing, though, away from just practicing, as a fan, to become more obsessive about it, was around the time of Miguel Cotto fighting Paulie Malignaggi. Okay. And I saw this documentary about Paulie Malignaggi's life. And I felt, I don't want to, I can't use the word sorry for him, but I felt like it's hard to explain. He had a tough life with his father, with the way he grew up. And I ended up really wanting him to win. I remember rooting for this kid, Paulie. A lot of people were at the time were sort of, I don't know, I don't want to use the word cussing him, but they were mocking him. This kid who's like with this spiky hair, he wants to fight Cotto. And he had this tough life. And a lot of people, for instance, don't know that the first 3 of the 4 fights that Paulie had, he won by knockout. And he ended up breaking his hand. And then he ended up breaking the same hand again. And they ended up putting pins in his right hand. So the guy had no right hand. And so everyone says, oh, he's got no power. He's got no power. That may be because of the damage he had to his hand. So then you see this kid adapt. And like I said, I'm very much into the technical element. So I love watching the likes of Bernard Hopkins or guys that aren't necessarily that powerful or that fast or that, you know, they might be okay athletes, but they're not relying on their athleticism. And yet they're able to become world champions. To me, that shows the ability to be a great chess player. And so I'm looking at this kid, Paulie, and how he's adapted and how he's learned the art of the game to be able to grow and become this champion despite these setbacks. And I remember thinking, you know what? I love this sport even more than ever now. You know, I want to learn more about these guys. And to this day, I'm the sort of person who is fascinated by the technical and tactical elements of a sport. Yeah, I enjoy a big puncher like anybody else, right? But if you're born with power and you just walk in and you're blowing everyone away, or you're really, really fast, like amazingly fast, yeah, okay, you were born with that. That's your genetics. Whereas these fighters that aren't fast, or they're not strong, they're not powerful punchers, and they're still able to compete, I want to know how they do it. And that's, I think, what makes me think, that's what interests me, that's what captures me, the scientific.
That's one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated with Mayweather, because Mayweather, I think had issues with his hand as he got older. Hence why he became more of a defensive fighter when he became, you know, Money Mayweather instead of Pretty Boy. Because Pretty Boy was more athletic, very fast and powerful, you know, more of a knockout. But when he got older, had issues with his hand. He adapted his style, became more defensive, which helped him, become undefeated. You know, help his legacy and became a more complete fighter.
And you know what the other thing is about Mayweather that's amazing, right? He's got a freakishly long reach, 72-inch reach, right? And he would use that very, very well. And so a lot of guys couldn't get close to him. Now, that's a physical element, kind of like speed or power or whatever. But there's a flip side to that coin. When you've got these long levers like that, when someone gets on the inside, because you can't withdraw, retract your arms and shoot them off in a short way, it's a disadvantage when you're up close. Floyd managed to adapt to become a top-level inside fighter. Yeah, right. Definitely. So this is the sort of thing I'm talking about. You've given a great example there of a guy who, as he got older, had hand problems. So he wasn't a massive puncher. Yes, he was fast. He fought faster guys. Yes, he had a freakishly long reach. But even when you took that away from him and you got on the inside against him, he knew how to handle himself there. And these are the things that fascinate me. You know, these are the things. So don't get me wrong. I love watching Muhammad Ali. What a beautiful fighter. Gets on his toes, dances around the ring. The fluidity is beautiful. Manny Pacquiao, the speed, the explosiveness, beautiful. But they're born with certain attributes that if you try to learn their style and you try to teach it to someone else who doesn't have their physical attributes, they're not going to be successful. Whereas the sort of guys that could be world champions without having those physical attributes, that's knowledge of the sport. The Bernard Hopkins, the Floyd Mayweathers, that is what really fascinates me more.
Yeah, definitely. I think Tony as well. So as you know, from the history of boxing, you notice that the fighters who tend to last long tend to be the more defensive, technically sound fighters, like your Mayweathers, your Hopkins, your James Tonys. But the fighters like Roy Jones, who was extremely athletic, unfortunately, when he got older, when athleticism was lost, his youth, his reflexes, then he career just, collapsed.
Exactly.
Hey,
you know what? Yeah,
a young man's fighter.
Exactly. And you know what? I can see you're wearing a Man United top there, so you're a football fan.
Yes.
This applies to all sports, right? It applies to all sports. Look at somebody like Andrea Pirlo, or, these sorts of guys, Xabi Alonso. They could play till they're quite old because they're able to control the tempo. They're not reliant on athleticism. Whereas if you were to look at some brilliant athletes like say like Obafemi Martins was a great striker, frightening to play against when he was young. But when he lost that pace quite early, he then declined quickly. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, pace, everyone talks about pace and power, athleticism, great attribute. Who doesn't want to see, a footballer pick up the ball from the halfway line, knock it 15 yards and burn the whole defense. It's brilliant to watch. But the ones that have that longevity are the ones that can adapt even without that. And that's what fascinates me, the little tricks they learn. Do you see what I'm saying? So it applies to all sports. I agree with you. You look at tennis even. The best players are often defensive players. To win a point against Djokovic, you've got to work so hard to move him around, and he's going to make you play that extra shot time and time again. Whereas a big server, say, who can smash it at 140 mile an hour serve, yeah, okay, that's great when he's on top. But when he's not on top, when he's not the one serving, he's a lot easier to deal with. And so, again, whichever sport you look at, I'm always someone who's interested in that, the intellectual and the technical, as well as the physical, not just the physical.
What do you say? Do you have a GOAT list? Would you say Mayweather's the greatest of all time? Would you say Ali? Would you say Lennon, Robinson? Do you have like a top 5 greatest fighters of all time? Are you the person that said you can't? There's no GOAT because it all depends on eras, and every era was different.
Yeah, do you know what? I find it so hard to answer these questions because everyone is so different. It also depends on the era they were in. So I'll give you an example. Rocky Marciano was a great heavyweight. There's no doubt about it. But if you were to clone Rocky Marciano and you were to put him in a ring today, you're talking about a guy who's 5'10". The men today are so much bigger.
Yeah, 6'5" minimum. Heavyweight, really 6'4", 6'5".
Right, and he would be, look, you can get 6'2" heavyweights like Povetkin and stuff, but they're small heavyweights. They would be, Usyk,
cruiserweight now. Marcel, we've seen a cruiserweight nowadays. We've seen a cruiserweight, maybe a light heavyweight.
Yeah. Exactly, and you look at someone like Usyk, say, who's 6'3". A lot of people say he's a small heavyweight. Well, George Foreman, whose nickname was Big George Foreman, he was 6'3", right? So when you look at a lot of these guys today, Rocky Marciano, if you were to clone him today with the modern day training techniques, he could probably make light heavyweight. He would definitely be a cruiserweight. Now, if you were to put him in with a 6'6", 18-stone guy who might not be a top, he might not be the very best today, but he's up there. He's good. He's strong. Say someone like Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte's a good top 10 heavyweight. At the moment, he's not elite. Rocky Marciano is probably too small. That doesn't make Dillian Whyte greater than Marciano. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So it depends on how you do it. If you were to clone all the heavyweights, the best heavyweights of all time, you were to clone them at their best and you put them all in a tournament, if I had to bet on the one guy to win the most fights, I think, and I don't say this with any great deal of confidence, but I think I would lean towards Lennox Lewis. Now, if that means he's the best ever, then fair enough. It depends on what your definition is. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Whereas what makes Muhammad Ali so great is that he was able to overcome so many obstacles, even when he was past his best, to beat other legendary fighters. And that's what makes him amazing.
Interesting point, Lennox Lewis. I had a debate with a friend of mine. Call me crazy, but I think Tyson Fury potentially beat Lennox Lewis in his prime. Tyson Fury fascinates me for a big guy who's extremely fast, for a guy his size, and his reflexibility to recover from punishment. Arguably, I think Tyson Fury maybe could be a top 3, top 5 heavyweight of all time. I think Tyson Fury could even in the era of the Ali's type, your Ali's and your Foremans and your Frasers, I think Fury could compete in any era of heavyweights.
So in terms of cloning them, like I said, I don't disagree with you. You're right. He's in the conversation. I think he's there. Lennox is there. I think Vitaly's there. I think there are a lot of fighters who, potentially Fury would be the best. I don't think he can be the greatest yet. He's got to beat the top guys in his era. But in terms of the best, Now, the thing is with Tyson Fury, I think that the types of fighters that give him the most problems are the smaller, faster fighters that can go from outside to inside quickly and land big shots. The raiding fighters. A guy like Lewis isn't necessarily like that. So stylistically, you're right. He could cause Lewis major problems. I'm not saying he necessarily wins. That's a great fight. But I don't believe there's any heavyweight who would be undefeated. If you put all the best in the league and they all fought each other, I think they'd all lose to someone, right? But if you're looking at Lewis, I agree that of the guys he could fight, Fury's one of the ones who could potentially give him the most problems. I agree with that. They're great fighters, man. They are. And they're just different eras.
Would you Would you say, I think Joshua could have competed in other areas? Because some people say Joshua is good only for this area because this area is always better. He's not as strong as other areas. Would you say that? Would you say AJ is one of those heavyweights that could have been champion in the golden era of heavyweights?
I do think he would be up there. I think he's a great fighter for any era. I think people exaggerate. Do you know what it is with Anthony Joshua? He got overrated initially. You had people like Barry Hearn saying he's the best ever, he's better than Ali. And so a lot of people had enough of the hype and they started to turn against him. The reality is he's lost to Andy Ruiz and he avenged it. Well, Lennox Lewis lost a couple of fights to Rackman and Oliver McCall and he avenged them. You know, these things happen. You get shocks that happen. And he's only then lost to one very special boxer in Alexander Usyk. And we don't yet know if he's going to avenge it. The guy's got one defeat and he's a unified heavyweight champ, was a unified heavyweight champ. He was an Olympic gold medalist. He's a big, heavy-handed guy that can box a little bit too.
Yeah, he beat both amateurs. So he can beat the big guys. His experience with beating the big guys as amateurs. So he can definitely beat a big guy.
Exactly. Listen, he's a great fighter, man. And, a lot of people like to... You know what it is? You know what makes me laugh, Yemi? You will get fans of a certain fighter. For instance, Tyson Fury. We'll use Fury, but this happens with all fighters and all fans, but we'll use him as an example for this discussion. You will get someone like Tyson Fury who people will say, his fans will say he's great. He's one of the best of all time. But then they undermine the guys that are around today. If Deontay Wilder's not that good, if Anthony Joshua is not that good, if these guys aren't that good, then what? Vladimir Klitschko is not that good. Why does it? How can him beating them mean that he's a great fighter? He just beat guys that weren't that good, right? So, and I know he's not fought AJ yet. I'm just giving you the example of if you're the king of this era, and then others are not that good, then why does that make you a great fighter?
Yeah, so definitely.
People, it's almost like they don't think it through. Yeah, the truth is it's a stacked division. We're very lucky in that we've got some brilliant fighters. And I believe that there's a number of them, to be honest with you, that would have been competitive in any era. I think Wilder is another one who, he's got some technical deficiencies, but so have other great fighters that have passed. George Foreman had some technical deficiencies. The fact of the matter is, Deontay Wilder is a massive heavyweight who delivers his power long. So coming through that right hand is dangerous. He's got a great chin, great heart, and he can touch you and put you to sleep for 3 days. That's a serious guy. Then you've got Alexander Usyk, who's a brilliant boxer with a very unique skill set. He's not
very high at boxing IQ. Extremely high IQ as well as a boxer.
Yeah, very high. And in historic terms, he's not a small heavyweight like people make out. Like, Joe Frazier was like 5'9" or something. Usyk's 6'3". This idea that, he's some small guy, that's not true. So, we're lucky in this era, and you've got a lot of guys on the peripheries right now as well. We don't know how these guys are going to develop. You've got guys like Joyce and Hergovich. We don't know yet Dillian White.
Jared Anderson to be quite
Jared Anderson, another potential superstar of the future. Daniel Dubois, still a very young guy. Don't sleep on Dubois because he had that one loss in a nip and tuck fight where he ended up not being able to carry on. He fought an Olympic silver medalist who's still undefeated in a nip and tuck fight. And Joyce is very similar to George Foreman if you're talking about stylistically. So again, a lot of people don't realize how stacked this division is. You've got a lot of Eastern Europeans, people like Arslanbek, Makhmudov, who's a beast. We'll see how he plays out. Jalalov, who was a standout amateur, another beast. We'll see how it plays out with him. So there's a lot of talent around, man, and people need to start appreciating the depth that we've got in the modern day instead of always trying to mug it off like, fighters of the past were superior. This is just silly. We've got great fighters around today.
I do think that boxing fans should give more credit to Klitschko brothers. Even though they fought in the very weak heavyweights, I do think they're definitely all-time great. I definitely think Vitaly could have competed in any other heavyweights as well. Especially Vitaly.
I agree. I think they both would have. I think they both would have. With Vlad, I do think there is potentially an issue there with his heart. And listen, he's a great heavyweight by any era and any standard. I think he's got the talent to be. But I do think against other big heavyweights that would have put it on him, if he'd hit a crisis, sometimes I question how he would have coped against some of the biggest and the best. If George Foreman had him in serious trouble, if Mike Tyson had him in serious trouble, does he bite down on that gum shield and come through it? Lennox Lewis, I'm not so sure. Whereas Vitaly is right there. I agree. Vitaly is there.
Yeah, definitely. What in terms of boxing nowadays, my issue is, as you know, I think especially in the American boxing market, I think it seems every boxing nowadays is prioritizing be undefeated and trying to fight less, trying to be next Mayweather. Everybody's trying to have that Mayweather career. I fight, weak opposition for the most money, be undefeated, have 20-0 record, and hopefully I'll become the next Mayweather. Do you think Mayweather's legacy is hand sport, especially the American boxing market, the whole PBC? No one wants to fight any risky fight unless it's purely in-house for the most money. What do you think? How do you think Mayweather's changed boxing? Do you think he's doing it for the worse or the better? I call Mayweather a curse.
It's difficult to say because he's brought more money into the sport. He's an all-time great fighter. There's no doubt about it. But this idea of emphasizing the zero, the undefeated, is damaging to the sport. But a lot of that is not to do with Floyd. Floyd's job is to make out like he's unbeatable to build up his fights. That's what all fighters do. I can't be beat. I can't be touched. This is what I used to say that. I can't be beat. Roy Jones used to say, I can't be touched. They all do the same thing. Really, who's at fault here is the fans. That's who's at fault. We're the ones who will write off a guy for losing a fight. Just a minute ago, I had to justify why I mentioned the guy Daniel Dubois, because I know some of your listeners might listen in and think, what? Dubois lost to Joyce. How can he be a great future prospect?
No heart. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. He's a quitter. He's got no heart. He's this, he's that. People like to sleep on guys once they've lost the fight. They write them off, right? Josh Taylor recently, in a fight I felt he lost. This guy was a pound-for-pound top 10 fighter. All of a sudden, ESPN took him off their list. What are you talking about? Like, he's still up there. What, just because he had one contentious fight, all of a sudden people are ready to write him off? Because boxing's like that. It's going to make boxers who are reliant on fighting for their money, for their income, they're going to think, why am I going to go and risk losing my livelihood when I can just sit there and big up some guy who's not a good fighter if I know I'm going to make millions from it? Until fans start saying, yeah, listen, nobody's unbeatable. Even Floyd, right? Floyd fought guys at the right time. Great fighter, but he fought guys at the right time. There were a lot of guys that may have been all wrong for Floyd at a certain given time, and he knew when to take what risks. Don't fall. And Floyd arguably lost that first Castillo fight. Yeah, so people can't assume that there's no one ever that could have beaten Floyd. There are guys out there that would have. Tommy Hearns, stylistically, in my opinion, was all wrong for Floyd. If they were around in the same era.
Sugar Leonard as well. Sugar Leonard could have beaten Floyd as well.
Yeah, he could have potentially done, for sure. I could see how he does that. I can also see a method in which Floyd wins that. I think that's a great fight. I've got no problem with saying Leonard wins that. That's a great fight. That could have gone either way. But Hearns, I would be stunned if Floyd beat him, just based on styles. Not that Hearns is better than Leonard or anything, just stylistically. He had an even longer reach than Floyd. He would have had to have come forward, and Floyd wasn't really, although he was a great boxer at range and mid-range, even when he was a young money Mayweather, he wasn't really a guy that would hunt you and chase down an opponent and slip shots to bypass those powerful long levers that are coming at him. That's not really Floyd. So stylistically, I think Hearns would have been wrong for him. That doesn't mean that makes Floyd any less of a fighter. Do you see what I mean? So this idea that if you lose, like he's been exposed, he's been exposed. That's a fan mentality that has to change. It's damaging to the sport.
Yeah, because UFC, pretty much all the great fighters lost multiple times, but the UFC fans have backed them to the full. That's why you keep getting all these competitive fights in UFC. Would boxing, could boxing ever become like UFC, where there's one big division, one big promotion, or there's too many networks, too many promoters to allow that thing to happen?
To be honest with you, look, the UFC is one promotional company. MMA is a lot bigger than just the UFC. Like in Japan, they've got a massive mixed martial arts scene as well. And a lot of them are paid more than some of the top fighters in the UFC.
Really?
Now, what tends to happen is that apparently, I was watching a show that it was actually an interview that had William Alinarji in it, and he was discussing this, and he was talking about the difference in pay. And although I think the UFC fighters earn really well across the board, some of the top Japanese fighters in MMA industry were earning more. Now, what tends to happen is that talent will follow the money. So the UFC isn't the only MMA promotional company, even in the Western world. You've got like Bellator, for instance. Yeah, so what's happened is, imagine DAZN. Sorry?
Yeah, Strikeforce as well. Strikeforce.
Yeah. And so it's like, imagine DAZN becomes by far the best promotional company with the best stable, for argument's sake. Okay, that's all well and good. That's great. But it doesn't mean that everyone at DAZN, whoever is the king at DAZN, is necessarily the king of all the other promotional companies. You could have a star fighter who's in another promotional company. So I don't really ever want to see a situation like the UFC in boxing. What I want to see is these different promotional companies stop using the excuse of you have to cross the street. No, the fans again have a point in that, have a part to play in that. It's the fans that have to demand. Listen, for instance, the PBC, the whole thing with Spence and Crawford, the PBC saying Crawford needs to cross the street. PBC fans, Spence fans need to come out and say, listen, I think Spence is the best. I think he knocks out Crawford. I've got no problem with people saying, I think he knocks out Crawford. But you've got to say, stop crossing the street. I don't care whether it's on the PBC or on any other network. I want to see this fight. And when enough fans start doing that, same with the Crawford fans. Yeah, I think Crawford beats Spence. I think he's the best in the division, but I don't know for sure because he's not fought Spence. So you've got to hurry up and fight Spence. Enough of this demanding 60-40, 50-50, split on platforms. Let's see it. When fans start doing that, we get to see the best fights. Instead, we're seeing a lot of fans that have started to affiliate themselves with specific networks. And you even see jokes like, oh, he supports Matchroom FC, like it's a football club. That has to stop. If that stops and we can see the best fight the best, and I don't really need to see it come like the UFC. You know, having a fight marinate over a period of time, there's nothing wrong with that. You just don't want it to go over the top and marinate for so long that it ends up spoiling. You see what I'm saying?
I agree with some criticism. People, I guess you heard this a million times, like boxing's dying, UFC is a new thing in town. UFC is now the #1 combat sport in the world. Do you think boxing will ever die or become is there a time when where UFC is so dominant that boxing is on a decline, or boxing here to stay and it needs time to regrow? Because I think boxing was bigger in the 90s where you had Tyson, Lewis as a whole. I think boxing was bigger in the old days. We had more competitive fights and had bigger stars.
So boxing, if you not under the Queensberry rules, but as a martial art, dates back to ancient Greece even. It was in the Olympic Games. Blatantly dates back to before that in other areas of the world. MMA, UFC, the most champions that have been produced in the UFC have had a martial art background of wrestling. Now, wrestling is Greco-Roman wrestling. It's a Greek martial art, which goes again back to ancient Greece. These things don't die. You're talking about centuries and centuries. Now, the rules were different. In ancient Greece, for instance, they used to have these leather hand wraps that would be encrusted.
Spare me, Chris. 1 minute. Oh. Tell I'm busy with you. I'll come and get anything. I'm back now. You were saying, sorry, Chris, you were saying? Hello, Chris, can you hear me?
No problem. Yeah. So in ancient Greece, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I can hear you
fine.
I can hear you. Yeah, I'll go.
Hello? Okay. So, okay. So in ancient Greece, for instance, you would have the rules that would be a bit different. You know, in boxing, they would wrap their hands with these leather straps, and those leather straps would have stones and sand encrusted into them. So it would be a brutal sport where people would die. It was madness. It's like hitting people with knuckle dusters in a bare knuckle fight with leather straps. Crazy. But the point is, the idea of hand-to-hand combat will never die. People will always be drawn to that. Unfortunately, it's just Can you hear me?
I hear you. Your screen's a bit crashed. Screen just crashed a bit.
Okay, shall I start this bit again and you can edit this bit out and I could...
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, let me know when it's fixed.
Okay.
Can you... I'll just keep talking and let me know when my screen's sorted.
Try again.
Is it working at all or is it still the same?
Yeah, it's working now.
Okay, so am I right now? Shall I carry on?
Yeah, carry on.
Okay, so martial arts, a lot of these martial arts, take boxing, for instance, it dates back to ancient Greece and probably even beyond that and, places before that, eras before that. But basically basically, and even the idea of mixed martial arts dates back to the ancient Greeks and the Olympic Games. In MMA, for instance, in the UFC has produced multiple world champions, but the martial art that has produced the most world champions is Greco-Roman wrestling, which is a Greek martial art, wrestling. And so this idea of either one of these arts dying out is just not going to happen. It's been around for far too long. And so yes, things were different. They weren't Queensberry rules. In boxing, you would have the fighters that would wrap their hands in these leather straps, and the straps would have been crusted with stones, precious stones sometimes, and sand and broken glass. So it was devastating when you're hitting somebody. People would die. It would be like wearing sharp knuckle dusters, right? So it's not the sport at all. It was brutal. But the root of it is the same. The fact of the matter is hand-to-hand combat is going to appeal to an awful lot of people. And so, yeah, for me, I just feel that boxing is always going to be around. It may become more and less popular in different nations and stuff like that. But yeah, I can't see it dying down anytime soon.
Okay. Can boxing survive? Because I know, I think the reason why boxing wasn't as big in the 90s, in the early 2000s, I think it was the 90s, because of the heavyweight division being weak, being done by the Klitschko's. Can boxing survive? You mean boxing can only survive as far as the mainstream level goes if there's heavyweight, if it's a competitive heavyweight division? Because they always say boxing is always, people care about the big guys, the heavyweights.
Yeah, you know what? I personally think that for me, it's not necessarily about how competitive it is, but how much you sell it to the public. You look at someone like Derek Chisora, say, the public love watching him because he's a great character and he's a great fighter to watch. Even if he's going to take on guys where you might not think he's got much of a chance of winning. If we found out tomorrow that Derek Chisora is going to fight Deontay Wilder, I think the majority of us will feel that it's not a good fight for Chisora. But Chisora's got so much heart and he's going to bring it that it's going to be a great fight while it lasts. And so sometimes it's about buying into the character and the personality. And in the 90s, the early 2000s, as great as they were as fighters, the Klitschko's didn't have personality, certainly not to translate to a Western audience that some of their predecessors had. And I think that's what struggled to sell it. Whereas now, you've got Anthony Joshua, you've got Tyson Fury, you've got characters. Deontay Wilder is a character, they're characters. And when you're able to sell characters and people buy into them, and that's what can make boxing really successful, in my opinion.
Yeah. See, in terms of boxing sport, you don't think it's about the heavyweights per se, about having the characters, that have mainstream to appeal, that makes the sport interesting. Not about necessarily, because a lot of people say it's all about the heavyweights. People come see the big guys clash. People don't care about the small guys so much. People always care about the heavyweights. Boxing's always been about the heavyweights.
I don't think I agree with that, to be honest with you, because Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao are international superstars, and even beyond them, when you look past them, there's still a lot of guys that middleweights over the years, middleweight stars. Canelo Alvarez, Golovkin. Before them, you had the likes of Marvin Hagler. In this country, we spoke already about Eubank and Ben. They caught the imagination. These guys weren't heavyweights. To me, it's more about the characters. It's about what you can sell to the public. Groves and Froch and Groves and DeGale, these caught the imagination. None of these guys were heavyweights. I genuinely believe it's about buying into the story. Can you sell me the idea of this fight? And when promoters get it right and boxing gets it right, it captures the imagination of a whole nation. And I think that's the key, to find ways to relate fighters to the fans.
Okay, that's a good point. In terms of boxing now, what's your view on the zone? Does the zone survive? Or does the zone need... Because a lot of people say the zone, Eddie Hearn, the zone is only going to last so many years before they go bust, because the zone not big. Boxing is not big enough marketing to make that type of money for a zone to work. You need to have other sport, like maybe football or UFC, etc. What's your opinion about the zone and the future of boxing in the media in terms of an app, or do you reckon you need to be on TV for it to, for a promoter to make money, really?
It's hard to say, because the future does seem to be moving towards online. I'm a sort of person who still prefers to watch TV. I mean, take yesterday, for instance. On 3 occasions, the app, for whatever reason, had an issue during the fight, right? And I had to reload it. And so I ended up missing, it was only something like 10, 15 seconds on each of the 3 occasions. But it just wasn't as consistent as a TV channel. That's going to be something that they're going to have to address. The other thing, apart from that, is the promotional aspect of it. The reason they said that they got themselves an app rather than TV is so they could keep their costs down and charge fans less. The problem you have with that, though, is then the promotional aspect. You look at someone like Sky, they've captured the football, and by capturing the football, they're able to promote their fights throughout every football match, beginning of a game, half time, full time, and they're ready to jump onto the bandwagon of football. Now, the Zone tried to get the Premier League rights and they didn't manage it. That was a big